Showrunner for the Lord of the Rings of Power, Patrick McKay, made it abundantly clear that he was not actually trying to create a story that would entertain, that would try to enthrall audiences and give them something to enjoy. Rather, he is trying to push a political message, and he used the show to do that. Not only was he trying to use the show to do that, but he is using it to punish his enemies and reward his allies, as novelist Isaac Young has theorized, which we will get to. But before we get to that, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And yes, you read that right. Patrick McKay compared the destruction of Khazad-dûm by the Balrog of Morgoth to climate change. You cannot make this up. That is what he did. And he did this in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter following the conclusion of the show's second season. He was asked by The Hollywood Reporter's James Hibbard, "Over in Khazad-dûm, I always had the impression that once the Balrog was released, he wreaked havoc and drove everyone out of the mines immediately. But in your story, this is more of a gradual corruption process. That city is still occupied, and they're still going to be fighting for it going into season 3. And this is how McKay responded. "This is a thing where, how do societies fall? Usually it's gradually and then all at once. If you want to use climate change as a metaphor, climate change is not an event. Climate change is a process that ebbs and flows. That's always headed in a dark direction." I mean, I think a kingdom as great and powerful as Khazad-dûm does not fall in a moment. He is literally comparing the fall of Khazad-dûm to climate change. He probably thinks that because the Balrog is in flames, he's heating up the world. I mean, you literally cannot make this up. This is what these people do. They cannot think outside of their own politics. That's all they see. That is the end game. Their power politics is the end game. Climate change is a process that ebbs and flows. It's always headed in a dark direction. What ebbs and flows, but then always headed in the same direction? What? Like, it's just all gobbledygook. But it doesn't matter because he's pushing climate change. Jeez. I think a kingdom as great and powerful as Khazad-dûm does not fall in a moment. The fall is the product of many disasters over time, and I think it would sell Khazad-dûm short for the Balrog to get out, and then it's all over. It's more complicated. We think there's a bigger story to be told here. Yes, because they want to continue their climate change narrative that he just said that's what it's all about. He's literally saying that is the theme. The theme of the fall of Khazad-dûm is supposed to be climate change because the Balrog is a giant ball of fire. Like, that's literally what he's saying. This is not Tolkien. This is not Tolkien whatsoever. We know that the dwarves' downfall is due to the rings. Tolkien wrote this in the Silmarillion. Sauron gathered into his hands all the remaining rings of power, and he dealt them out to the other peoples of Middle-earth, hoping thus to bring under his sway all those that desired secret power beyond the measure of their kind. 7 rings he gave to the dwarves. The dwarves indeed proved tough and hard to tame. They ill endure the domination of others, and the thoughts of their hearts are hard to fathom, nor can they be turned to shadows. They used their rings only for the getting of wealth, but wrath and an overmastering greed of gold were kindled in their hearts, of which evil enough after came to the prophet of Sauron. And then if you actually look at the Lord of the Rings and the Appendix A, which they say they have the actual rights to use, we know that Khazad-dûm was not destroyed until the Third Age. So this whole awakening of the Balrog didn't even happen when in the time period the show is supposed to be taking place. But this is what he wrote. He says, "It came to pass that in the middle of the Third Age, Durin was again its king, being the 6th of that name. The power of Sauron, servant of Morgoth, was then again growing in the world, though the shadow in the forest that looked towards Moria was not yet known for what it was. All evil things were stirring. The dwarves delved deep at that time, seeking beneath Baranzanbar for Mithril, the metal beyond price that was becoming yearly ever harder to win. And obviously, I think we can assume that it's possible that one of the rings was influencing that decision, that greed to find Mithril. Thus, they roused from sleep a thing of terror that, flying from Thangorodrim, had lain hidden at the foundations of the earth since the coming of the host of the West, a Balrog of Morgoth. Durin was slain by it, and by the year after, named the first his son, and then the glory of Moria passed, and its people were destroyed or fled away. That is correct. You read that right. You listened to that. The Balrog was literally awakened, and within a year, he had killed Durin and had killed his son, Nain, and the people of Moria literally fled Khazad-dûm. It was literally destroyed in a year, almost immediately. So the Hollywood Reporter guy, James Hibberd, was right, because that's how Tolkien wrote it. Now, because these people do not care about adapting Tolkien, they care about desecrating him. They care about humiliating the people that like Tolkien. They care about destroying their political enemies and rewarding their allies. They have turned the destruction of Khazad-dûm into an allegory on climate change. So says Patrick McKay. And just to be clear, you can go to Appendix B, and look at the dates. You can see that Durin's death occurred in the Third Age, 1980, while Nain the First died a year later in the Third Age, 1981. And then it also notes that dwarves fled Khazad-dûm in the Third Age, 1981. They literally saw the downfall of their civilization within a year after awakening the Balrog because of their greed for Mithril. Like, that is what happened. That's the real story. But again, as I said, they're turning it into this climate change. And it's all about pushing the political agenda and destroying and desecrating Tolkien's work. And as I said, this is fits in perfectly with novelist Isaac Young's theory. I think he does an excellent job in this video here. I think this is probably one of the best videos I've seen when it comes to analyzing what these people are doing. He puts it very succinctly. Obviously, he uses Star Trek, but I think it applies to pretty much the entire woke agenda that we see coming from Hollywood, as well as people in the video game industry. And this is what he says. He says, Hollywood exists to reward its friends and punishes its enemies. And its products are emblematic of that fact. Hollywood does not exist to entertain you. It is an organ of a greater international apparatus that has declared war on native populations of the West. He then explained this concept using The Last Jedi's depiction of Luke Skywalker as an example. He's saying, making Luke Skywalker feed at his breast, literally referring to that creature. That milk is like luking or milking in the milking in the island there. Was not a poor decision of a worse screenplay. It was a deliberate choice backed by corporate executives, directed, written, and shot by industry leaders, funded with the backing of millions of dollars, packaged into a movie called Star Wars, and subsequently broadcast to the entire Western sphere. Make no mistake, this was done with the same spite of a child ripping a toy out of a younger infant's hands and declaring it to be their own, and to make sure it would be their own by crapping all over it. And that's exactly what they're doing here with The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's work. They're crapping all over it to try and make it their own. Fortunately for us, we know this tactic now. We see this. We can point this out. We laugh at this. We know that this is not the actual truth. This is not the real story. And we have the real story that we can go back to, and we can ignore this. I have ignored this. I will admit I watched the first season, and I tried to watch the second season. I only got through the first episode, and I was completely turned off, and I've not watched it since because I saw it as what it is. It is an absolute desecration. And now I just talk about how absolutely stupid these people are and what their actual intentions are to try and warn other people from watching this absolute garbage show. And this is all over the show. It's not just this Balrog of Morgoth here being an allegory for climate change. I mean, we can jump over here You can see the director is doing it. It's not just the showrunner. It's all of the people involved in this production are trying to push this political agenda. They're claiming Galadriel was in love with Halbrand because, of course, the this great leader, this great exemplar of the elves was in love with evil. Because you got to do that. You got to have her in love with evil. It's just absolutely sick what these people are trying to do. They're trying to indoctrinate people into, yeah, you should obviously love these evil guys. Just go with the evil guys. Ignore the fact that she was in a loving marriage with Celeborn, had a beautiful daughter, Celebrian, who had an absolutely tragic, awful life, but found love with Elrond and gave birth to Arwen, who eventually becomes the bride of Aragorn. But can't have that. Have to have her in love with basically the devil. It's just sick. It's absolutely sick, disgusting stuff what these people are doing. And then you can even jump over here too. And then they try and say that, oh, it was. We had the Tolkien estate and Tolkien scholars look over this. They reviewed it, and they assured that the story adhered to the legendarium. So they're just trying to gaslight you too, to try and get people who do not actually go back to the text and think that they're actually getting the real story, because they're trying to rewrite the story. They're trying to rewrite the story in their political image, in their woke image. So that's all that you know, because again, it's all about pushing their political agenda while also rewarding their allies and punishing their enemies. And then we can even jump over here too. This was from the Hollywood Reporter. And this is like, this is just some of the most absurd line of thinking I've ever seen. And you can see how it's all about pushing the political agenda. Because he says, so he's asked by Hibbert, I think it's Hibbert, so is this Gandalf being born for the first time? And McKay says, well, Middle-earth has many ages and many histories, and there are tantalizing hints in some of J.R. Tolkien's writings that Gandalf has appeared in different forms and has walked among various races. The idea that perhaps there is even an earlier story of him is for someone else to tell. No, he arrived in Middle-earth in the Third Age. Tolkien very clear about how that occurred. So complete and utter lie. Now, obviously, he was in a different form, and he did walk among the elves and the peoples of Middle-earth before he was given a corporeal body and the task of rallying the people of Middle-earth against the dark influences of Sauron. And then Hibbert, the Hollywood Reporter, goes on and says, because when he comes back as Gandalf the White, he's discombobulated for a few minutes, but this time not knowing who he was, not knowing his powers for such a long time, I was wondering what the sort of internal explanation was for that. And then they're like, we don't have one. We don't have one. Those details we might reveal as the story continues to go forward, but he did have an identity before that moment in the crater. Well, of course he did. We know this. Because he's basically an angelic being. He's basically an angel that was given corporeal form. And so then here's the last part. And the Dark Wizard reminded me of Saruman, but since Gandalf doesn't think of Saruman as a Dark Wizard in the Lord of the Rings, I'm presuming this is not him. And McKay says, I think that's a very safe presumption. We know that in the history of Middle-earth, some wizards become corrupted. So there is precedent for this. But that doesn't mean it's the same guy. As you say, it wouldn't actually make sense for it to be Saruman. Well, it wouldn't actually make sense for your Gandalf guy to be Gandalf either. I mean, like, this is what I'm talking about. These people do know what the actual text is. They know the lore. They're not unknowledgeable of this stuff. So when they're actually changing all of this stuff, they're doing it out of spite. They're doing it out of malice. They are, as Isaac Young says down here, they are the older child ripping the toy out of a younger infant's hands out of spite and declaring it to be their own. And not only are they taking it as their own, he's saying they're crapping all over it. I think maybe a better analogy to that is they're actually destroying it, or they're attempting to destroy. Maybe he's right with the crapping all over it, because at the end of the day, the source material is still there. We can wipe away the poop stains of the Rings of Power and still find Tolkien's novels beneath. And we can still read those. And we are finding fantastic The ability that we have to reject watching this stuff with our time is really being proven to be really powerful, especially in the video game industry, where people are not purchasing video games that are doing this. They are not spending their times playing those video games. Rather, they are finding time spending either playing the original or playing older games, etc. And these video game companies are facing very, very dire straits, many of them laying off lots of employees. So it is kind of attacking this, how would you say, this patronage network that Hollywood has with their movies and television shows, where they're able to fund people like J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay to desecrate these stories. Whereas we look at the video game industry, that is not as prevalent the case. These video game companies are having to lay off employees. They are having to shut down in many cases and no longer be able to create these desecrations that they had been. So I definitely think we can get there as well in Hollywood. We just got to say, no, stop watching this stuff. Don't even pay for their subscriptions, etc. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.